This is GuvKDF, an animator who is known for making Roblox animations for his young audience. He built an audience of over 33,000 subscribers by presenting himself as someone entirely different, a shy, harmless guy who constantly needed to be comforted. He claimed to have one of the rarest medical conditions in the world where he could not even drink water and had to rely on milk every day. He even told his audience that his own brother had spent years actively trying to kill him. He even claimed a mysterious entity haunted his existence and it could influence his life and body. Thousands of children believed every word he said. But after years of keeping up that image, a few of his own biggest fans started decoding everything he said. The more they talked, the more they realized they had all been told different stories. And the deeper they dug, the more they uncovered years of hidden Discord messages, disturbing interactions, and a side of GuvKDF that almost nobody had seen before. This is the story of GuvKDF, who went from one of animation YouTube's most sympathetic creators to one of its darkest scandals. At first, GuvKDF doesn't look much different from thousands of other animation creators online. Also known as Governor Bosterman, he is a 23-year-old animator born on December 7, 2002. He comes from New York, USA. Gov has a YouTube channel where he built his audience through animation memes and Roblox-style videos, mostly using all motion shapes. He presents himself through a simple mascot, which is a red and black blocky character. This character shows up throughout his content. Nothing about that sounds unusual. You'd probably think he was just another young animator making niche videos for a small audience if you stumbled onto his channel with zero context. But it is important to understand that animation memes and Roblox style content don't attract a general audience. They attract kids because that's who's on Roblox and that's who watches this genre of animation. The stats say Roblox itself has almost 40 million users under the age of 13 that log in every day to play Roblox games. That explains why most of GuvKDF's audience was young, whether it was his comment section, his fan base, or his Discord server. It all skewed young from the start. And if you look at the Gov's fan art, it clearly seems like it is created by children who are still beginners. If that alone isn't convincing enough, there are even videos of children openly standing him. So it's obvious that whatever he built with that platform, most of the people consuming it were children. And that's where things start getting strange, because behind those animations, GuvKDF wasn't just showing off his art, he was portraying himself as someone kids naturally wanted to protect. For instance, his mascot described him as a shy guy who got scared by the smallest things. His art was used to tell a story that he wanted everyone to believe about himself, one where he came across as helpless, misunderstood, and constantly suffering. His old YouTube bio is a perfect example of this. It described Gov as kind, easy to use, weak, and a crybaby. He even called himself cringe, almost like it was a badge of honor. Think about what that kind of description does to a young audience. A grown man calling himself weak and easy to use doesn't sound threatening. It sounds soft, like someone who wouldn't hurt a fly because he can barely take care of himself. Because of that image, kids approached him like a friend. He came across as gentle and a little pathetic in an endearing way, and that made him feel safe to talk to and easy to get close to. He was so kind that he would reply to almost every single piece of fan art made of him and repost it. To a child, that kind of attention means everything. Getting noticed by your favorite creator is enough to build a genuine emotional connection. That fragile personality is exactly what let him build such a young following in the first place. His own claimed suffering pulled in sympathy and attention over and over. His personality reinforced the same idea in his audience's minds that this was just a soft and harmless guy who needed someone to be kind to him. Every interaction only strengthened that image. Usually, an adult acting strangely around a child should raise red flags. But GuvKDF had already trained his viewers to see him as someone who needed comforting rather than someone worth watching closely. And once someone earns that kind of trust, people naturally stop questioning the things they say. But what was it exactly that made kids feel like they needed to comfort him? Firstly, he claimed he was one of the rarest people in the world because of a health condition he had. The condition is called aquagenic urticaria. Aquagenic urticaria is a rare condition where your skin breaks out in itchy hives whenever it comes into contact with water. Up until now, fewer than 100 people in medical history have been diagnosed with aquagenic urticaria. Apparently, Gov was one of them. He claimed it was so severe he couldn't even drink water. But here's the problem. Most documented cases of aquagenic urticaria involve a skin reaction to water. It is not a disease that comes with inability to drink it. People who actually have the condition can usually drink water normally. While Gov said he had to drink milk and even his tears made his eyes burn red, GuvKDF's version doesn't line up with how the condition shows up in nearly any real case on record. So either he wildly exaggerated a real diagnosis for sympathy, or he was claiming to be one of the rarest medical cases on the planet. Those are really the only two possibilities. And to the kids who believed him, there wasn't much reason to question it, because Gov came across as a trustworthy guy, and also because kids don't exactly spend their free time reading medical research papers to fact check someone's condition. Another reason kids did not question him much was because, according to Gov himself, he could literally die from the stress it would cause him. He mentioned it himself that he had a weak heart condition, so stressing him out was never an option. Looking back, almost every part of the image he built encouraged people to feel sorry for him before they ever thought to question him. But his health wasn't the only reason that helped create that image. It was just the beginning, because Gov wasn't only asking people to believe his medical conditions, he was also asking them to believe an entire world built around him. A world filled with family members, mysterious entities, and loyal friends who always seemed to appear whenever his stories needed them. Gov's world came down to 3 people he wrote into his own life. The first was Knox, who Gov described as his older brother. According to him, Knox was for years. He claimed Knox had tried to kill Gov so many times that he lost the count. He even tried to drown him, strangle him, and force himself on him. If everything he said was true, then Knox wasn't only an abusive sibling, but also the source of almost every trauma Gov claimed to carry with him. He also said Knox abused animals in their home, including a kitten that had to be rehomed after Knox allegedly strangled it. So his traumas were partly the reason why kids felt sorry for him. It made Gov look less like an internet creator and more like someone who had survived an unbelievably tragic childhood. But this seems too fabricated when you see the full picture. Gov said Knox supposedly disappeared after a prank went wrong. He fell from somewhere and was never found. He's presumed dead, though even GuvKDF has stayed vague about whether he actually believes that. This was a badly crafted lie, because how come his parents never called the police? And how come there was no investigation? He lives in New York, and CCTV footage must have been available. Did they just presume him dead and move on like nothing happened? This sounds even worse than the previous lie. Yet GuvKDF insisted Knox was completely real. He went after people online who questioned it. To him, doubting Knox was questioning one of the biggest tragedies of his life. And as if Knox wasn't enough to lie, there was also Oz. GuvKDF described Oz as an entity that spoke to him inside his own head. He said he originally thought Oz might be God, but apparently Oz didn't want to be framed that way. He claimed Oz pushed him toward things he knew weren't right and that it got worse over time. He said Oz could physically change and manipulate him and would sometimes stop him from eating. He even claimed he brought it up to a doctor and never got a real answer. It sounds like someone describing an incredibly serious mental health struggle, but the way Oz was later used is what makes the story take a much darker turn, as this is something that scared even the kids who comforted him. GuvKDF used it more than once to convince a 13-year-old girl that she could be physically altered by it too. A grown adult was convincing a child that a self-made entity could affect her as well. That goes far beyond simply talking about your mental health online. GuvKDF built an entire narrative around a dead brother and a mind-controlling entity purely as tools to shape how a young, trusting audience saw him. That is a staggering amount of effort to maintain a version of yourself that may have never existed in the first place. And then there's Dude. GuvKDF described Dude as a real-life friend who took over his account and ran his server whenever he wasn't around. It sounds believable enough. Friends help each other all the time. But the moment people started comparing the posts, things stopped adding up. Because later, Dude became the reason Gov was exposed, and that's what makes this so disturbing. None of these stories stayed in the background. It was actively being used. The people closest to GuvKDF inside his old server were almost entirely young girls between 12 and 14, with some members as young as 10. These aren't kids mature enough to spot manipulation when it's dressed up as vulnerability. They're exactly the audience most likely to believe a grown man who presents himself as haunted and constantly on the verge of dying. And when you realize who that fictional world was actually used for, it sounds more than just disturbing. Because all these medical conditions and characters he built were not real, they were used as a weapon to control real children for years. In January 2026, an animator named DuckyDuck, also known as Skelli, had been contacted by 3 of GuvKDF's own fans who had something to say. Skelli did not reveal their names for the sake of their privacy, but she referenced them as Purple, Blue, and Yellow. That's how they'll be referred to here too. Blue and Purple were 13 years old, while Yellow was 14 years old. Purple reached out to Skelli on January 19, 2026, directly asking to talk about something involving GuvKDF. Skelli said she had a feeling what it was about before she even opened the message, because she herself had previously confronted Gov for his shady attitude. Skelli said that she had a direct confrontation with Gov where she told him plainly that his actions were harmful and that he needed to see a psychologist. Gov then announced a break because of this confrontation. Purple had comforted GuvKDF after that, since he described it as deeply upsetting to him. So when Purple, Blue, and Yellow needed somewhere to turn later on, Skelli was already someone who had shown she was willing to speak up against Gov's attitude. She accepted the invite and got added to a group chat with all 3 girls. What the 3 girls described once they were together in that chat was not a single bad moment, but a sequence of being controlled for more than a year. And this is where Gov's story starts falling apart. Purple explained that Blue, Yellow, and GuvKDF had all been friends for over a year. Notice how Purple started off by mentioning that it was a bad choice to be friends with someone who is a decade older than them. If a 13-year-old was mature enough to realize this friendship was a bad choice, a 23-year-old man was certainly fully aware that building friendship with young girls was completely inappropriate. For more than a year, he had been manipulating these girls and had done awfully questionable things. These were 3 girls, and you might think that despite being young, how 3 of them could be fooled all at once by a fully grown up man. Well, that is because within that friendship, he would confide personal secrets to each girl individually and then ask each one specifically not to share it with the others. This isolated each girl from the other 2 so they could not catch Gov's manipulating attitude early. And whenever any of them tried to pull back emotionally or set even a small boundary, GuvKDF had a response ready. He'd make himself the one in distress and guilt trip them until they were the ones comforting him instead of the other way around. Purple described how this left lasting effects on her ability to trust people. Blue independently described the exact same dynamic, making her deeply uncomfortable. And so did Yellow. But none of this was new. To truly understand the scale of his manipulation, we need to trace back his pattern to one of his earliest victims. Gov's core pattern reaches back roughly 2 years earlier to Orange, who was GuvKDF's earliest known victim. She was 12 to 13 years old when she became close to him as a friend. Orange had actually deleted her Discord account entirely because of the terrible experience she had with Gov. She only came back to provide evidence once she learned that Skelli was investigating the whole matter. She and Purple had stayed in loose contact through Pinterest, and that's how Orange first found out the group chat existed and asked to be included so she could share her own account too. Her story mirrors Purple, Blue, and Yellow's almost exactly, just 2 years earlier. In 2024, GuvKDF and Orange became friends. In November 2024, Gov asked Orange for her home address. He said he wanted to help Orange by reporting an situation in her household to the police. And while Orange reassured that she was not panicking about it, Gov still kind of framed it as a situation where Orange would faint. Apparently, a grown adult should deal with such situations from an emotionally intelligent space, but Gov wanted it to look worse than it was with the intention to make Orange even more scared. Any responsible adult in that position would tell a 12-year-old to contact the police directly or reach out to Child Protective Services. He wouldn't ask for her address himself to report it. Yet after requesting her address, GuvKDF also encouraged Orange to consider running away from home. This was so irresponsible and careless of Gov to suggest. Running away carries serious, well-documented risks for kids, including exposure to violence, and homelessness, along with strong long-term links to worse mental health outcomes and higher dropout rates. Gov was 22 at the time and was old enough to have known at least some of that. Alongside all this, Orange described intense guilt tripping and emotional pressure in private messages. In one screenshot she provided, GuvKDF described himself in graphic, self-deprecating terms, listing off every way he believes he's failed the people around him and saying he deserves the bad things that have happened to him. That's a grown man sending that to a 12-year-old, by the way. And before we get further into what else he did to Orange, let's have a look at his royalty system. Inside his Discord server, GuvKDF maintained a system of ranked roles based on how much a member liked him, ranging from obsessed at one end to hater at the other, with several ranks in between. He kept a channel literally named Hate, and at one point maintained a playlist on his YouTube channel made up entirely of hate videos aimed at him. Every part of this, the roles, the hate channel, the persona in his bio, was structured around the same goal of sorting his audience by loyalty. And he was rewarding the children closest to him with more access and more of his attention. And since 12-year-old Orange was incredibly close to him, he had placed her in the obsessed server. But then on a random day, GuvKDF removed Orange's obsessed role in his server. When Orange asked the reason, he dismissed the question. When she tried to end the conversation to go do something else, he told her he'd wait and that she couldn't avoid talking to him. When she came back later and said she couldn't keep waiting, he got upset. He eventually told her he'd never message her again. A 12-year-old was being guilt-tripped by an adult for not responding quickly enough during school hours. Just like this one incident, he was always vintage to her. She said it was easy to feel emotionally dependent on him because he was older and someone she looked up to. That same core behavior present with Orange 2 years earlier repeats itself almost exactly with the newer group of girls. But this time, the details became more intense and hard to ignore. Like when Gov asked Orgain for her address, we could consider it as a protective measure. But then a year later, he asked Purple in the friend group for her phone's IMEI number, a 15-digit code that identifies a specific device. That number can be used to look up a device's model, its warranty status, and its carrier, and in the wrong hands, it can potentially be used to try to track a device's real-time location. 13-year-old Purple didn't know what the number was for at the time and gave it to him without understanding what she was actually handing over. Then in November 2025, GuvKDF asked Yellow for both her home address and the name of her school. He followed it up with a comment saying he might come see her. After learning her address, he told her in a separate message not to worry if she woke up somewhere other than home. Well, that straight up implies and it should scare anyone in their right senses just like it scared Yellow. He then asked Purple for an address too, and when Purple asked him what he meant, he just kept making it more confusing. He first said he wouldn't kidnap her, then followed it up with nothing but ellipses when she asked again. We could give it a benefit of doubt and assume it was a joke between actual friends, but even then it reads very differently coming from an adult who isn't this child's friend in any equal sense. He has no reasonable context in which he is allowed to joke in such a way to a minor at all. And it cannot be ignored so easily because all three separate girls, Orange, Purple, and Yellow, had been asked for their address throughout these 2 years. If it had been a one-time joke, no one would remember it, not even the girls. But he kept repeating it to the extent that he thought it would be funny to give a disclaimer of to a 13-year-old. And sadly, the children were young enough not to recognize it as a threat because Gov would be sad if they questioned him and would guilt trip them by saying he had a weak heart. Gov's manipulation game had all these children scared of holding him accountable. But all of this was just the top of an iceberg, because alongside this stalking, he had also been rooming these girls silently. Orange is the first known person who exposed how weirdly he talked to her. Like once GuvKDF told Orange that he wanted to be with her constantly. In August 2025, she suggested he take care of himself, and he responded by saying he just wanted to be near her instead. He called her beautiful in extended messages. Orange herself said these messages made her feel physically sick. She described how he'd frequently call the girls around him angels, and how his kindness toward her somehow left her feeling guilty instead of comforted. Even Yellow was called an angel by him. What genuinely disturbed Yellow was his fantasy about her. On May 31st, 2025, Yellow sent a video of herself to Gov where she was crying over something. Gov took advantage of her vulnerability and said, "I want to hug you so bad, hug that you will feel better. I want to pat your head so you will still cry, but out of happiness now. I want to cover you with blanket and give tea and cookies, and I don't want to say that, but I want to do." That is downright pathetic and just not something that we can ignore over and over again. And if Yellow was verbally harassed by him, Purple had gone through an even worse experience. Gov took it to the next level by drawing a picture of himself hugging Purple. He had drawn Purple as a young girl, so he clearly knew the age difference. And hugging her OC from back was so weird because you just cannot understand what kind of hug that is. His art style is creepy as fuck. This guy was clearly obsessing over little girls, exploiting the trust and vulnerability they placed in him as a popular creator. Like one of the victims of GuvKDF mentioned how she thought Gov was someone she thought she could trust, but it proved to be wrong. She does not wish this upon anyone, no matter the circumstances. I thought I could trust, but I was wrong. I do not wish this upon anyone, no matter the circumstances. Stay safe online, people. Take this as a lesson me and the other victims give you as heritage. I seriously don't understand how someone could be this immature and just outright disgusting. And if rooming didn't make the matter worse, what he did next is beyond any sane person's comprehension. Because while he was rooming kids and asking for their address, he was also controlling these individuals through fear at the same time. Remember the self-made entity Oz who Gov claimed spoke inside his head? Purple says GuvKDF privately told her that Oz could see Purple too. He claimed Oz had the power to physically change her. He didn't present this to her as a story or a creative idea. She says it caused real ongoing fear in her, including anxiety about her own body. Gov really got her to believe that Oz was somehow watching her even in ordinary moments. Gov vented about Oz to Purple specifically and privately. He'd reportedly get scared to talk about it with anyone else, which meant the full weight of that secret and everything that came with holding it landed on a 13-year-old girl. At one point, he even drew an image showing Purple as having been changed by Oz and showed it to her directly. He's since deleted it, but Purple says it gave her nightmares for weeks and describes the content as deeply unsettling. It is so shocking that a grown man used a fictional entity he built himself to frighten a 13-year-old about her own body. And he did it privately where no one else in the group could see it happening or step in to stop it. And when Purple tried to talk it out with someone else, Gov got mad at her. He had isolated Purple with this little self-made secret of his, but Oz was not the only tactic he used to control his young fans. He even faked a medical coma. His friend Dude supposedly stepped in to run his account and manage his server while he recovered. The friend group believed this lasted around 2 weeks. During that stretch, Dude kept posting content including character models that took real time and effort to produce. The Dude story started falling apart once the girls compared notes directly. They noticed Dude's art style, down to specific rendering choices and mistakes, was nearly identical to GuvKDF's GuvKDF's own. They noticed his typing patterns, his phrasing, and even his typos matched too closely to be coincidence. And that is when they realized they were being manipulated by Guv. So on January 19th, Purple messaged DuckyDuck directly asking for outside help understanding what was going on. Guv has been in a coma for the past 3 weeks. Apparently, I must add again. His friend's been texting us using his phone. We think Guv is kind of a liar, to be honest. That's the message that pulled DuckyDuck into the group chat where Purple, Blue, and Yellow laid out their full case, first among themselves, then directly to Dude. They confronted him point by point for the identical art style and for the identical typing quirks. Dude tried to lie that he was posting old pre-recorded videos on GuvKDF's behalf during the coma. This explanation was something the girls found hard to believe given how much new content kept appearing. Dude denied everything. At first, he defended GuvKDF on points he would have had no real reason to know about. He also claimed GuvKDF had briefly woken up during the coma and just needed more rest. That explanation only made things more suspicious. Eventually, Dude cracked under continued pressure. He admitted GuvKDF had actually only been unreachable for 9 days, a number that flatly contradicted what the girls had been told, since by that point, they believed GuvKDF had been in the coma for closer to 2 weeks. Within minutes of Dude giving that number, GuvKDF himself reappeared in the group chat. Think about what that timing actually requires. Dude would have had to physically reach him, explain the entire situation, and hand back his phone, all in an implausibly short window. GuvKDF apologized once he came back. But even in that apology, he reframed the situation. He told the group he needed a break. That shifted at least part of the emotional weight of his disappearance back onto the very children who had spent 2 weeks believing he might be dying. Yellow told him directly how disappointed she was. She said his apology wouldn't undo what they'd gone through, especially after spending that stretch of time genuinely praying for him to recover. GuvKDF responded by calling himself stupid and saying he hadn't realized it would affect them the way it did. The damage went far beyond the victims he targeted directly. Beyond the request for personal information and the fictional world he used to manipulate them, GuvKDF's old Discord server exposed a much wider group of kids to psychological harm. Some of them were as young as 10 years old. This goes beyond his relationships with Purple, Blue, Yellow, and Orange individually. His server had a dedicated venting channel where members were encouraged to share personal struggles openly. And there was a rule attached to it: if someone vented and wasn't comforted by another member, that member could be banned. If you ever will ignore someone's #vent, it will be bad. If you can't comfort, at least to show your care, even if you don't. The more you ignore, the more chance I will do something bad. That meant kids as young as 10 were being pressured to emotionally support other members, including teenagers dealing with serious personal issues. If they refused, they risked losing access to the community altogether. That channel wasn't a safe place for kids to vent. There was no structure and no one making sure things stayed healthy. Instead, it became a place where very young children were constantly exposed to things they were never meant to deal with. And if they refused to take part, they risked being punished. And the consequences weren't just theoretical. Multiple children in the server reportedly ended up after being exposed to this environment for so long. Because inside that server, Guv also kept what he described as a written record of SH in a notebook. Every time a member mentioned self-harm, he'd log it. He told his audience he intended to eventually act on all of it himself, all at once, like their pain was something he was collecting and would one day repay in kind. The kids were literally scared of the notebook. On March 1st, 2025, he was talking to Red, who was 12 years old. He told them that for one mistake, one vein is gone, and if Red or any other fan made a mistake, he would remove a vein. Another user who later spoke about what happened was Pink. She was only 10 years old at the time. According to Orange, GuvKDF allowed her into the server on the condition that she stayed in the venting channel. But because he failed to properly manage that space, she was constantly exposed to other children's darkest thoughts and experiences at an age when she couldn't possibly understand or process any of it. His negligence created an environment where this kept happening again and again to different children over a long period of time. Orange described it as something that spread from person to person. She said GuvKDF never directly encouraged her to self-harm. Instead, it was the constant emotional pressure he created. He was always asking for comfort, always hinting that he was in crisis, and over time the entire server started revolving around his need for attention. And as more distressed kids poured into the venting channel, hoping for his attention, that behavior started spreading. More and more members became desperate for the same validation he'd trained them to give him. Anyways, he was also frequently using a long acronym for SH. When something like this becomes normal in a space full of young, impressionable kids, it spreads. Children that age don't always have the emotional maturity to recognize when they're being manipulated or pulled into unhealthy behavior, and that makes what happened next even more disturbing. GuvKDF later admitted privately to Skelli that the notebook was never real. According to him, it was meant to keep his viewers safe by making them think he'd hurt himself if they ever self-harmed. Whatever his original intention was, the outcome was anything but protective. By his own account, his idea of keeping people safe was threatening self in front of an audience that included elementary school aged children. That's not a safety measure, it's the same manipulation tactic, except this time it was aimed at an entire server instead of just one person. And this wasn't an isolated incident. The same pattern of using guilt and emotional distress to control people shows up repeatedly in his interactions with Yellow. In May 2025, Yellow casually mentioned to Gov that a classmate might have a crush on her. GuvKDF immediately twisted it into an accusation. He implied she had reminded him of wanting to hurt himself years earlier, and that her comment showed she still wanted him to. Her actual words got misread and twisted into a way to make her feel responsible for his emotional state over something she hadn't intended at all. GuvKDF reacted the same way toward other members too, including a child referred to as Lilac. When Lilac mentioned feeling depressed, GuvKDF responded by implying her feelings had harmed him. Yellow tried to defend Lilac, and Gov turned on Yellow instead, accusing her of lying. He then went on to saying he wanted to be silent forever. Yeah, I definitely must be silent forever. I will never talk again. Bye. He said that he had cut himself 3 times that day because of that. Here we go again to Gov guilt-tripping yet another minor. He then said he wanted to disappear into the nearest lake. That comment was made directly to a 13-year-old in the middle of a conversation that had started with another child simply saying she felt sad. He turned the whole scenario into a situation that wanted to make him drown himself. Taken individually, each of these moments could be argued away as poor judgment from someone immature or mentally unwell. What he did was absolutely disgusting. I'm not sure if he was like that because of a mental illness or not. He still damaged real people emotionally and physically. I really hope the victims heal. But after enough examples, it stops looking like a series of mistakes and starts looking like a pattern. That's why when you look at everything together, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Whether it was Yellow, Lilac, Sage, Pink, or the rest of the server, the response was always the same. Whenever a child expressed pain, discomfort, or even an identity he didn't agree with, he found a way to make it about himself. His feelings came first, no matter the child's age or what they were dealing with. It's honestly disgusting how people do this. They're kids. When you emotionally ruin a child, you're messing with their mind. And because they aren't fully developed, they don't know if it's wrong or right. There are also some other miscellaneous things he did that are just straight up worthy of a side eye. Like he reposted a fan art of himself and his dead brother where both of them were being shipped. That is kind of necrophilia because he should be deleting it, not reposting it by rebranding it with a touch of necrophile tag. And as if the necrophile tag was not bad enough, he then posted a drawing of himself drooling over a 13-year-old. It was due to this disturbing attitude that Skelli personally confronted GuvKDF more than once over roughly 2 years. She told him directly that his actions were harmful. We have already seen the first of these confrontations happen after Skelli joined his server in June 2025 and started noticing his behavior firsthand. She told him plainly in DMs that what he was doing was creepy and that he needed psychological support. GuvKDF had apologized at that moment, but the apology didn't address any of the specific behavior being raised. It was a pattern that would repeat for the next 2 years. He would acknowledge just enough to end the conversation without ever actually changing course. Whenever he got confronted, GuvKDF would tweak things just enough to ease people's concerns without ever dealing with the real issue. Like after being confronted about the self notebook and the venting channel, he stopped referencing the notebook publicly and eventually deleted the venting channel outright. On the surface, these look like real steps toward accountability, but months after one of these confrontations, GuvKDF deleted his entire old Discord server, the same server that contained the bulk of the evidence documented throughout this video. GuvKDF didn't delete the server until months after people confronted him. If he was truly remorseful, you would expect him to change his behavior immediately. Instead, waiting that long makes it look less like remorse and more like an attempt to erase evidence before it could be used against him. His apologies followed the same pattern every time. Even his most recent public apology about the faked coma wasn't something he wrote from scratch. It was a heavily edited and watered down version of an older apology he'd already made, reused and trimmed down to fit the latest situation instead of actually addressing what happened. No matter which apology you look at, the pattern is always the same. About 10% is spent acknowledging what happened, while the other 90% shifts the focus back onto his own guilt or the people who were upset with him. He never publicly named or directly addressed the behavior people were actually criticizing. Instead, he hid behind vague statements about needing a break, making mistakes, or not knowing any better, while avoiding any real explanation of what he'd actually done to the children around him. Then, in May 2026, GuvKDF announced another change. He said his DMs and a newly created Discord server would now be restricted to users who were 18 or older. From that point on, he publicly claimed that only adults would be able to interact with him. The timing of that announcement is hard to ignore. It came right around the time GuvKDF learned that DuckyDuck was making a video exposing him and had no intention of dropping it. By that point, nearly 2 years of documented interactions with children had already happened. Introducing an 18+ boundary only after the exposure became unavoidable didn't erase or undo what had already happened to the children who were affected. Around that same time, GuvKDF reportedly sent a message to DuckyDuck's partner. He also began telling them that he wanted to hurt himself because he could no longer talk to minors online. It was yet another attempt to gain sympathy and attention, and it came at the exact moment he realized the video wasn't going to be stopped. Then, on June 8th, 2026, Skelli finally dropped the video. It blew up almost instantly, pulling in more than twice as many views as Gov had subscribers. And with that, GuvKDF suddenly had far more people criticizing him than supporting him. I had no idea who or what Gov was until I saw this video. This guy made my blood boil. Minors, faking his identity, making up his own mental issues, and even pretending he's dead just to manipulate kids. I am truly disgusted by his foolish behavior from a 23-year-old dude. The backlash came and people absolutely hated him. This situation is really disturbing. A literal adult acting this way towards literal kids is really gross. This guy and people like him are the reason we should keep the death penalty legal in the US. This situation is really disturbing. A literal adult acting this way towards literal kids is really gross. And of course, thanks to Skelli for bringing this to light, as whatever evidence is presented in this video is directly taken from the files she leaked. Anyways, since the backlash was huge, GuvKDF posted a response addressing the accusations directly during the same week. In it, he stated that he is a bad guy, that he doesn't deserve anyone's pity, and that bad guys shouldn't be given pity. He confessed to the behavior covered throughout this video. No one showed him mercy this time. This time, his shy and scared persona wasn't going to do him any good. I'm highly disappointed with you. Yeah, bye and don't come back. He then deleted all his posts on YouTube channel. In his own words, by his own account, he was gone. And his own username puts it right. For the sake of the victims who finally spoke out, we can only hope his new channel name is a promise he actually keeps, quitting for good.